Welcome to Artflakes on CBA TV, the show where we talk about creativity generally. Today, we are going to the second part of Zambian literature. Remember, in our last episode, we had what we refer to as an exploration of the country and the people. But this time around, I think I have something I'm putting in my pocket. I'm not going to tell you until we get to the other side of the studio. You're going to understand that this time around is going to be fantabulous. When something is fantastic and it's fabulous, then it's become fantabulous. Meet me on the other part of the show. This is Artflakes. Don't go away. Welcome once again to Artflakes, the show where we have already discussed about in the previous, on the other side of the studio, that is going to be a unique part. Today, it is unique because I'm not alone, and my regular guest is also not alone. But I'm going to start with my regular guest. You know the person, that is Mr. Umar Osabo. On the other side, I have a new person, very new in the system, new in even in the show, and that is Mr. Abdul Hassan Taiwo. Today we are going to the second part of Zambian literature, and you know, when you meet, whoever you meet at the backyard is the father, right? Or do you say it? Whoever that is you find in the house, that is the owner or the father of the entire house itself. And that means that Mr. Umar Osabo is going to kick off with the literary world of the Zambians. Previously, he discussed in detail the Zambians themselves, their culture, their experience, their history, etc., etc. But this time around, we are going into their literary world. Are they poets? Are they playwrights? Are they novelists? I don't know. And you don't know too. Let's hear from an expert who is going to discuss about this. Over to you, Mr. Umar Osabo.
Right. Thank you. Generally, the Zambian literature, from a huge range of studies, one can conveniently say they have more of novelists. They have more of novelists than any other genre of literature.
Okay.
They have great writers who are memo writers, novelists, and so on and so forth.
Short story writers too?
Yeah. Eh?
Oh, short story writers.
Yeah, short story. Short story is just an ambience of a novel writing.
Novelized.
Yes,
Okay.
a novelized. You get, before you become a true novel writer, you have to start writing short stories to get yourself acquainted to how language is used, the techniques of narrative.
So before we go into everything, there's one question I want to ask you. If you look at, you're just telling me that there are more of novelists. Novel is more of direct writing, it's prosaic. Prose is direct form of writing. Does that mean they are not very deep in the language? Is that why they decide to go into that? Why would a nation focus more on one part and we don't have more people who can go deeper into the language? Because if you want to really express the wound in you, you have to go beyond just novel writing. And the novel writing is just, as far, that's my perspective anyway, or my understanding of the literary world. You have to have dramatics that at least to entertain the people and make things, and you still convey the message and make a change. That's an aspect of play. But when you look at the aspect of poetry too, poetry will bring out the wound within and solve the wound without. That's the simple definition of poetry as far as I'm concerned. Why do you think this is so as far as Zambia is concerned?
I think it's a very good question. I think in literature, whether you write poetry, whether you write plays, whether you write novels or short story, that does not limit the extent of your creativity. It's just a passion, because literature is a mirror of the society, and the thing different between a poem, a play, a novel, or a short story. It's just a superficial difference. By the time you remove the superficiality in a poetry writing, a poetry can become a play. By the time you remove, you unloose or unknot the act and scene in a good play, it can also become a prose. You can also reduce prose into play. For instance, let me use the Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart it was originally a novel, but it has been reduced into play, depending on the level of one's creativity. So you can also reduce a poem into a drama, or a drama into a novel, or a novel into a novella or short story. I don't think, because they don't have more of novel writers or dramatists and poets. It could be their passion. It could be their interest, because in creativity, in literature, you could see people who write the three joints of literature: poetry, drama, and prose. And you could see somebody who is just writing just poetry or that just play. So it does not limit them in any way.
I want our other guests to look at this from linguistic perspective, from semantic, pragmatic, or discourse analysis perspective. You've looked at the language. Well, I'm looking at the language of poetry, language of prose, and language of drama. Which one is stronger in terms of the nitty-gritty of in terms of semantics, in terms of pragmatics? Which one do we use? We integrate some of this. I mean, these elements.
First and foremost, I believe that what a novelist will write maybe 5 pages. A poet can just put it in just maybe 3 lines, and it will communicate. And looking at poetry, it has more of poetic devices and everything having to do with linguistics analysis, because it's possible for someone to use semantics, pragmatics, to analyze poetry or poems. So looking at prose on its own is not something having to do, it's always wordy. It's wordy in nature, while drama sometimes is not something wordy, it's not that lengthy. But the three, I can say, poetry has something having to do with brevity. Instead of using maybe 5 pages, within just a line or 2 lines, you can communicate, beyond what a novelist will do.
So when we look at it in the meaning itself, which one convey deeper meaning? The drama, the prose, or the poetry?
The one that conveys deeper meaning is poetry.
Okay.
Just because a poet has poetic license, we can even demystify something that is left unsaid from a poem. But looking at novel on its own, sometimes we generally look at the grammatical aspect and maybe plot and other things. But poetry, we can go deeper using linguistic devices.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I've got what I want our viewers to understand here is that every aspect of literature, every genre of literature has one purpose or the other. Simplicity of your message for the different age group. It will be easier if it is in prosaic form. Or perhaps that's the angle I'm looking at it. They want to convey the message to a wider audience. So, and I feel that is why that is done. Let's look at Zambian literature. Talk about Zambian literature generally.
Well, Zambian literature, like I've earlier pointed out in the first episode of this part of this program, is clouded by historical antecedent that has to do with the Portuguese and the people of the Conscian people that are known in the modern history as the Bushmen. Then slave relationship between them and the Arab, and slave trade relationship between them and the Western world. And shortly after the the abolition of the slave trade, a lot of funny things happen, which we have all discussed in our last episode. Today, I think there is this novel. It's a kind of an epic. It's an ancient narrative of the Koshian people, Obuseko Obeke. That is Joy in Sadness. Joy in Sadness is a long narrative. It was formerly in an oral form, but it has now been reduced into writing. It's a story of two young lovers, Rebecca and Ronald. You know, they met in Kwamba, a community in Zambia. So Ronald was working outside Kwamba while Rebecca was working at home. So though they've been communicating, exchanging letters and all that, so it got to a point that Ronald decided to come home to come and formally make introduction to her family. So the young man was highly excited. So she was already at the bus station. You know how love could be sometimes. 2 hours or 3 hours before his arrival. So she waited for almost 3 hours. He did not come. The bus has not arrived. So she said, okay, let her go home and prepare water and some other things that he will use when he comes. So before she left the bus station, she told a woman who has a shop that, okay, she described him, that so and so person is coming. If he comes, please tell him that I've gone home. I'll be back soonest. So she went home. She did all that she was about to do. Then on her way back, there is Spings McKinsey or something. That's in Spings McKinsey. He hates her because Rebecca works with the annex commissioner of the British government. She was working as a secretary to him. So he never likes her. He sees her as a threat to the struggle of the people of Zambia for freedom. So he strangled her. He killed her. So finally Ronald arrived. So the entire community became suspicious because they really cannot say who is behind the killing of Rebecca, Ronald's lover. So the society is now divided. Some are saying Ronald is a killer. Some are saying no, he's so much in love with this lady, there is no way he could kill her, and all that. So this seriously infuriated Ronald. So one morning he took an axe, he went to the bush, a nearby bush where she was buried, and he was trying to kill himself with the view that wherever Rebecca is, he wants to join her. But fortunately, a forest guard stopped him. So he was unable to kill himself. But at the end of the day, he still went to prison because the society is becoming more divided by the day because of the issue. So the government has to throw him into prison. So in the prison, a lot of things happen in the prison, like hitting his head on the wall of the prison, and he sustained so many injuries. He was rushed to the hospital. But later, through a boy, in the novel, we're not told the name of the boy. A boy who assisted the police officers. They were enabled to know that it was McKinsey that killed Rebecca, not Ronald. Meanwhile, McKinsey was on top of a mountain. At this time, the antithesis in the narrative became very clear to everyone in the community that forced the government to bring out Ronald out of the cell. So the boy took them to a hilly site where McKinsey was hiding on top of the hill. So he now used his catapult and bullets him up there. So he fell off. So one of the police officers picked a rock, a rock. He wanted to finish him, but Ronald stopped him. But in the process, McKinsey still died on his own. Then at the end, Ronald got married to another lady called Maggie. So I think this is just a plot story of the.
All right. I think this is very, very sad story, particularly about the life of Ronald. What can you say about the character of Ronald in relation to the real life of the people, particularly in Africa?
Initially when the novel began, Ronald was not actually interested, or he was in love with Rebecca, but just because of shyness, he couldn't express himself, telling Rebecca that I love you. And Rebecca had to wait for some time. Something I can say, contextualizing it in the real life, is that it is something that is natural, that a man could feel shy before expressing himself that, okay, I'm interested in you. It's something natural. It happens. And one of the things that could be a factor is maybe financial factor. And what's it called? Maybe social factor too. Or let's say a woman is, in terms of status, a woman has a job that is more paid than maybe a man. And it's possible for that man to, just to lower himself, that for someone like me, I'm not that rich to marry such a woman. So it's better for me now to just buckle everything now, so that I won't be able to be disgraced. I think it's something natural between a man and a woman, that just because of financial status, it's something that, okay, I won't be able to say, let me just wait till I get the courage.
Okay. Look at the perspective. That is the initial stage of the real life contextualization. What about the experience he had when he got into when he entered the town? When his people accused him, the experience he had in the prison like that. How can you relate it to the real life situation, particularly in Africa, particularly the political situation?
I think the the integral thing, or the central theme in that novel, as with regards to Rebecca, Ronald, and Spinks or Mackenzie, who killed Rebecca, is trying to show is a kind of is anti-colonial narrative. The people are trying to decolonize themselves in every sense of the word. Though the reason behind the narrative, is not really Rebecca-Ronald relationship. The relationship is just used as a motto to convey a message. The central thing in the message is the killing of Rebecca. Because why would Spinsy or Mackenzie kill Rebecca? He killed her because he sees her as a threat. We are trying to liberate ourselves. We are trying to get our freedom. Then why are you working for this person? I think if you look at this narrative, you could compare it with what happened in Sarafina. Sarafina, a South African movie based on the story, the youth uprising against the apartheid system. So just like there's this character called Gita. I remember when Sarafina led a team, they went to Gita's house and they were trying to ask him, why is he telling the police, why is he telling the whites their secrets, their plans on what to do? So I think Mackenzie suspected Rebecca in almost the same way. Perhaps that was what led to his killing her. And as regards to how the society is divided, it's a natural thing. In Africa, we somewhat believe in mint. Mint. Whenever we don't have an answer to a particular incident, we try to make a mint out of it. So I think it's part of our nature as a people. I think almost every African society has its own mint. From our previous episode, we have.
Does it mean that our investigative power is a little bit lower than those in the Western world?
No, it's
because
not.
It could have been when you talk about the mythological world. I think it makes it easy for us to get things done easily if we check using the spiritual power that we have. It could have been easy, but why do you think the writer failed to use the spiritual system to get to the root of the
you
problem.
when you're analyzing a literary text, you have to analyze the text within the text, though you can go intertextual, that is relating the text with other texts to bring out the hidden meaning, the pragmatic meaning in the text. But I think it's not as if we always depend on mythology. There are so many ways. There are scientific ways, for instance, divination. Divination in most African society is used to unveil what the ordinary eyes and ears cannot see or hear. So divination is one way of spotting or telling who actually does what in African society. But before it gets to that extent, it usually started with mythology. It usually started with a kind of suspicious and mythology or being suspicious about a crime. I think is a norm even in an English society, because I could remember in common law, for instance, it is even a crime for you to be suspected for an offense. It doesn't matter whether you did it or not, because within the period that you are being suspected or you are being investigated for a particular crime, you are not a free person. Your freedom of movement, your freedom of whatever association could be curtailed for the time being, pending when they are unable to.
I don't want us to go deeply into law because we have very short time to round off this program. And I feel that we've been able to explore it as much as we can. I would want us to go into another part of can you remind us of any other text from Zambia that you feel we can explore today for our viewers to enjoy?
The old drift.
Old drift, okay.
On safari.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, the old drift on the safari, can you say something about it?
Yes, the old drift in the context of the text is a burial ground for the white colonial masters. So the old drift is intercontinental epic that takes, we don't use past time in literature analysis, that takes the reader from Europe to Kosian or Northern Kosian or Southern Kosia and to where is known today as Zambia. You know, the entire story is set in a platform of liberation, in the platform of freedom, in the platform of why will other man subjugate me? At least we are born equal. We have the same senses. We are from the same God. Maybe we are even serving the same God. Even if you are not serving the same God, irrespective of whatever the difference that is between we and them. We, Africa, and them, those who came, colonize us, stole our property, take our things from us. We never invited them in the first place. They just came, and because they have a white skin, they feel they are different from us.
So that's what the text is all about.
That's what the text is all about.
So I want us to look at the last part because I want to connect the three parts. Mr. Philippines, right?
Okay, Sarafina. Safari. Polyphene, Sarafina. You know,
I want you to look at that for that.
You see, that text is like, though it's written by two different authors, but there is a connection between the old drift and Safari.
I'm coming back to the comparison.
Yes.
I want the content.
The context is that Mrs. Polyphene was sent by the CIA to come and pose as a photojournalist in the government house of the president of Zambia. That she should be taking all the pictures, she should be intimating them of the movement of the president and all that as a ploy to come in and kill the president of the country. But unfortunately, days after days after, she couldn't find her memory, her memory card to the camera. So as she was busy looking for it, some persons in the palace became very suspicious of her. Then one thing led to the other, that she was kidnapped by the Zambian terrorists.
Look at African literature. Generally, we have something in common apart from Ethiopian literature that has nothing to do with that. That is colonialism. So when you talk about African literature, we have pre-colonial colonial literature, we have colonial literature, and we have neo-colonial literature. What can you say about this based on these three stories?
Looking at the old drifts, as you said, concerning something having to do with colonialism, and for me, I think one of the things we can find here is self-respect, because he said when the white men, they came trying to subjugate us, to make us to be under them, following their culture and tradition. And I believe everybody has his own way of life. We have something we were doing before they came to our continent. And everyone has the same brain cells, regardless of race, gender, or family background. No one has the right to be better than any other person until he or she is ready to give the person interested in subjugating someone until he or she is ready. But if you are not ready to be subjugated or to be colonized, I think it's something we can do, and that is self-respect. We should all have our own self-respect that nobody can conquer us, and we are good to go.
So if you look at the literature, and literature, we say it mirrors life of people. The hatred for the colonial master led to the death of the central character, right? One of the major characters. Then this same thing, we could see that in the second part, the old drift.
Yeah, the old drift.
Right?
Yeah.
And the last part has to do with the neo-colonial parts, where they never leave you alone. They take you, they continue to hunt you.
Yeah,
so that if you fail to follow their trend of leadership, I fail to supply them the instrument they will use to develop themselves, then you are done. Then they send people after you. Technically, they eliminate you, like how they eliminate Abacha and some other. I want you to run this part up and connect these three together. The three texts together.
If you ask me to summarize this text in one sentence, I will say superiority complex of the Western world to the African as well as other parts of the world, because this is not just happening in Africa, it's happening in Asia and all that. You see, the superiority complex the Western world has on Africa, I think, is barbaric, is condemnable, is something that should not be accepted in whatever way. Because when you look at the history, when you go back into history, blacks, we are the fathers of the world.
Even though I don't call myself black, I'm an African.
Africa is the father of the world. From all archaeological and historical finding, history has it that, fact and figure has it that man started in Africa, in Odeva Gorge. And today, science have confirmed it that as my skin is, I have 12 genes. It means I can produce myself, I can produce the Caucasian, I can produce the Asian, I can produce all colors. But this is not possible with any other race apart from the Africans.
So in a nutshell, I want you to look at Zambia.
Yes.
And run it up together with the text and connect it with their real life.
Zambia.
How related is their literary world and
for instance,
the text itself that they produce.
The first novel we talked about, Joy in Sadness, The Killing of the Rebecca, is as a result of cumulative provocation of what the Western world is doing to the people of the country that led the young of the Zambian, that led the young man to kill the lady, Rebecca. And in the second text, the All Drift, you know, it's portraying the white who are trying to come and settle in Zambia as carcass, as corpses, who appear not to have anything meaningful, tangible, that they wanted to really contribute to the life of the people. You remember in the first episode we talked about the British South African company. The British South African company was a company that the people of North Coast here were really benefiting. But because the Britishers who were colonizing them, they saw that these people are benefiting from this company. They refused to renew the pact. You remember that was what led to the crisis that led to the election, and election led to their independence. The British never came out and say, go, we have given you independence.
All right,
the way they did to some other African countries.
Thank you so much. I know if I allow you to keep speaking,
no, because it's
you
annoying.
Keep talking from
it's annoying.
From
you know, this is a fact.
Tomorrow,
it's annoying. You know.
It's because of the time we have, and we have to round it up today. I sincerely appreciate our guests today. They've looked at the linguistic parts and the literary parts, and even converted to the real world of the Zambians. And I believe we must have known how colonialism, according to my guest here, has bastardized the life of the people in Zambia, and how it has affected even their relationship, how the people of the West have failed to also leave the country alone to live their life peacefully. When we meet again, we'll be discussing in detail what we refer to as the real Artflakes of another country. Meet you next time.